Hey, everybody, welcome back. Thanks for joining me. This is Paul. I'm with This is Iron and Truth, and we are talking about identity. And this is the third video in the series that we're doing on lies that have been told to us through society, through life, around identity. And we're really doing this to uncover identity truths. And if you watch any of the other videos, this is really for my kids. Doing this to share with my kids around identity truths that I've learned. And if anybody else is blessed by it, then I think that's awesome. And I'm doing it really because I think there's an identity crisis. A lot of people are facing a fundamental crisis of their identity that's really pushing a lot of people to despair. They don't know who they are. They don't know why they're here, and that always shifts. And when that always shifts, there's a massive issue. When you're always chasing the next thing, there's a huge issue around who you are and what you can be. And we're seeing that in greater and greater levels with youth of today, around massive levels of depression, massive levels of anxiety. Suicide rates are going through the roof. And I believe it fundamentally comes back to an identity crisis. Today, one of the lies that we're going to look at is that you are your emotions. You, at a fundamental level, are your deepest desires. And by attaining those deepest desires, that you will be happy. And that happiness, again, another emotion, is that pinnacle that we're going to be shooting for. We're told this all the time. We're told this in commercials. We're told this in how people live their life. We're told this how we're coached to live our lives. Just search yourself, find your deepest desires, put them down, write them down in goals, and go after those with all your might. And I'm not saying goals are bad. I'm not saying deepest desires are bad. I'm not saying emotions are bad. I am saying that we wrap our identities completely and totally in these deepest desires. We wrap who we are and our self-worth and our self-value into those. And we go back to our definition of the condition of being oneself or itself and not another. That is a definition of identity. And within that definition of identity is this idea of there must be a stable core. You must, to be oneself or itself and not another, there must be a stable core that defines itself or oneself and not another. So we must have some stability and identity to truly have an identity. And so to define ourselves by our emotions or our deepest desires, and to say that is the core of our identity, has a fundamental flaw. There is no stable core. Because if you truly look at deepest desires, and if you truly look at emotions, and I'm going to do this through exploring my own life with you, they are ever changing. They're fickle. They're a horrible master. If you look into your heart and find these deepest desires and define yourself, you'll always be changing your identity. I look at myself at 10 years old, and I look at myself and the deepest desires of my heart. Oh, I wanted it so bad. I wanted to be a professional athlete. And that was just something that was, oh man, I really wanted to be, Kevin Mack. Kevin Mack and Ernest Biner, they were both awesome Browns players. I thought football was fantastic. And, the deepest desire of my heart was just to be a professional athlete. And oh man, I was pretty cocky kid, but I thought I could do that. And there was a lot of my self-worth wrapped up in how good I was around the neighborhood, and the kids around the neighborhood, he'll tell you that, right? I had some great friends. I had some people that I rubbed the wrong way. And fast forward, but that was my identity, right? There was a big part of me in that. And fast forward, fast forward 6 years, athletics was still a part of my identity. But when I was 16, the deepest desires of my heart had changed, and it had changed massively. And if I, look really at it, the deepest desires of my heart were pretty much driven by hormones at that point. It was all below the belt. Deepest desires of my heart were purely, I was a teenage kid that was searching in high school for sex. And even though I I couldn't attain it, I didn't even think it was right to attain it. that's what I thought was cool. And that's what I wanted to identify with. And that was the deepest desire of my heart. And then I look, around the age of 21, 5 years down the road from that, um, the deepest desire of my heart was body perfection. Like I started, I crashed out of swimming and some health problems and partied too much and crashed out of swimming collegiately. And but then I decided that the deepest desire in my heart is I was gonna lift a ton, and I was gonna look perfect. And I translated that to I wanted to be perfect. And man, that was a terrible deep desire. It was horrible. It was a horrible emotion to have, and it was a horrible goal to have. You want to be healthy, but it was all narcissism. And but I went after it, and the other deepest desire in my heart that came right alongside that was depression. And I had a deep desire to end my life. And again, that's a horrible deep desire. That's a horrible identity to have. So I had an identity that was wrapped up in body image and narcissism, and also this deep identity that's wrapped up in I'm a failure, and that I'm worthless, all at once. And you'll notice that those were all, I had those feelings and I had those deep desires all the way through. I had desires as a feeling. Those are not bad things. And I had emotions all the way through, not bad things, all very healthy, good things to have. They're pointing me to things that I should be doing differently, but wrapping my complete identity in those things is a very bad thing. It's always changing. It's always, emotions change. Desires are incredibly fickle. When I was 16, I looked back and said, my 10-year-old self was stupid. When I looked at 21, I looked back and I said, my 16-year-old self was stupid for having those desires. Now I look back at my 21-year-old self, incredibly misguided for having those desires. Those deep desires change, they shift, it's natural, right? So to wrap yourself up in your identity completely in those and achieving those desires, that is a lie. And it's a lie from the pit of hell that you should focus on that, right? You should have goals. You should try to attain those, but your identity wrapped in those desires and those emotions of the moment leads you down the wrong road. It is an absolutely unstable existence that leads to emotional roller coasters, and it's a pathway paved to hell. Like it feels horrible. Now how do you do that healthfully? How do you have these desires and emotions healthfully? Well, I was reading Psalm 139 the other day, and it really popped out to me. And King David is a king in the Bible. He had an up and down crazy ride. But one of the things you can always say about David, and if you read his story, I recommend you do, he's a guy that sinned like crazy, but was also a man that just tried to have a pure heart. And why you can tell he tried to have a pure heart and had a pure heart. He was said to have a heart after God. You can tell he released all these emotions and these desires to the feet of God. And even after he sinned, he came back to God and released them to him. And so he says this, where in Psalm 139, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go to the heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. He knows that God is with him always. Right. And he asks God at the end of this, he says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way within me, and lead me in the way everlasting. This is a man that was king of Israel. This is a man that committed some of the greatest sins you'd ever hear about. It was also a man that had some of the greatest achievements you'll ever hear about. And he has an emotional roller coaster like none else. But how does he get through it and not wrap his identity into it? He gives those emotions to God, and he says, seek me. He says, they're yours. God, they're yours. You give these emotions to me, but seek me and purify them. They're yours. They're not mine. You have given them to me. Now help me work through them, right? And lead me now in the way everlasting, right? help me work through them, and then help me use them to fulfill your good, not my own goals, but your good. And by then we can take our identity from the pure place, which is earlier in this spot, which he says earlier in this psalm, which he says, my frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained before me were written in your book. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. You created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I read that a little bit out of order, but you can read the whole thing, and I think you get the point. But so the point is, hopefully, David is an example of a man that had these emotions, but he did not wrap his identity into them. He gave them over to God, and instead placed his identity first in the fact that he was God's. He was God's creature. He was made in God's image, and said, okay, you're going to give me these things. You're going to give me these emotions. You're going to give me these desires of my heart. Now, how do I use these to go out and glorify you? Instead of how do I use these to glorify me, to become my own, or to make my group, or just to satisfy my deepest desires. Because if I do that, again, it's a pathway paved to hell, and it's an identity that will never be stable. Anyhow, I hope this is helpful for you. For me, it was really helpful. I've been through tremendous ups and downs, and I have never been able to really pinpoint why until I started to realize what I was putting my identity in. And so this is a big help for me. And so people helped me understand what I was putting my identity in. And then I started doing some crazy research into it. And I pray, Lord, I'm just going to offer this up. Lord, I pray that this is helpful to my kids. I pray this is helpful to anybody that's watching. I don't pretend to be a scholar. I don't pretend to be anything other than just someone that wants to share what he's learned and wants to share it with his kids. So I hope this is helpful, and I praise you, Lord. If this can help somebody, I pray it does. So God bless. Have an amazing day. I'm signing off for now, and we'll see you later. Bye.